It's that game, it's that team, and it's that time. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Sean Fitz, Ryan Snyder, the BWI Live Recruiting Show. Hello. Hope you're having a wonderful start to a very important week. There's a lot going on, and we're going to be focusing on the biggest, most important things going on Saturday, and it's not just what's going on between the lines. We will get to that. Our full game predictions coming up at the end of the show, and of course, recruiting all the way through. But just to rip this Band-Aid off, the most important thing you could do this week right now is to join Blue White Illustrated for 50% off of the annual price. Promo code JOIN50 gets you access to all of the information, the entire list from Ryan Snyder, all the recruits that are going to be there, not just the ones we're talking about today. Of course, you'll get analysis this weekend. You'll get premium intel. You'll get all of it for half off. The best time of year to do that. And of course, if you are here watching the show and you're new, and there's a lot of people and a lot of interest this week, subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, the home of James Franklin's press conference, where everyone on the internet goes to listen to what Franklin has to say, and also the home of BWI Live and all the great things that we do. That's out of the way. Sean Fitz, it's a big week. What's the top thing on your mind to start the show today? And how are you doing? Nice haircut.
Hey, thank you. It's a big week. So, I got to get pruned up and had to get taking care of everything. I'm part Italian. Most of that's on the back of my neck. So I needed to get that taken care of before Ohio State. So no, it's a big week. Happy Halloween to everyone. Happy kids off of school if you're in state college for totally perfect reasons. Obviously, it's a great week for that today and tomorrow. But no, it's wonderful, man. It's not the whiteout, but it's got big vibes coming into the weekend. Obviously, we're going to talk about the game later. But I came on here earlier this week and was like, well, this is the lesser of two really good things for Penn State with the whiteout coming up next weekend. But this list has taken off. Ryan Snyder has done an amazing job compiling names, getting confirmations, getting guys that are coming, that are not coming, that say that they're going elsewhere, but actually are coming here. There's a lot going on right now. So I do encourage you to check out the site. He's been all over it this week, and I got to tip my cap, which I'm not wearing right now, but I tip my cap to Ryan because he's done a phenomenal job. I think the coverage this week has been pretty darn good, and I would encourage you to check that out.
Ryan, how many Red Bulls or Celsius or whatever are you on at this point this week?
This is my second today, so we'll leave it at that, right? I don't know.
And it is 10 a.m. I pray for your heart.
Hey, buddy, you pray for my heart. Shoot. Hey, happy trick or treat, happy Halloween, everybody. Excited to get this weekend rolling. I'm actually really excited for tonight. My neighborhood, I did not know when I moved here, is really awesome for trick or treat. Like, it's more of a parents party than a kids party. So I'm excited for trick or treat for the first time in my life. But really, most importantly, we are focused on this recruiting list, which is up well over 90 guys now. And we'll be at 100 or so here by the end of the day, without a doubt. Well over 30. I think we're around 35. We'll probably be around 40 scholarship players, I would think, by the end of the day. There's a handful of guys we have messages out to. And yeah, man, this is the week we've been pointing to, since August, really since the end of the Lash Bash, I feel like, because of West Virginia being away. And yeah, Illinois ended up being a good list, but we knew UCLA would probably be noon. So I feel like there's been 2-3 months here where we've been saying, just get to November. And finally here we are with two massive, absolutely massive back-to-back recruiting weekends. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, and it would take a lot to knock Penn State practice off of our rundown, because last night James Franklin and the staff opened up the practice facility to not just us, but to the entire media. You can go and get all that information at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com if you subscribe to get all that intel on the message board in our post. But there's so much recruiting today that we're going to skip that for the most part. We might fold it in later, but we need to get to some of the breaking news this morning. Fitz sent a text message to the group that this came out from On3. 4-star QB Carter Smith decommits from Michigan, folding into something we're going to start the show off. So Fitz, lay out the situation and why this is relevant to Penn State fans.
Well, Penn State always overlaps with Michigan, and they did in quarterback recruiting. Carter Smith was one of the guys that was on the board early before the Nittany Lions took Beckham Kritza, and I think it was a top two with Penn State and Michigan. Michigan pressed hard. They got him early. I'm trying to do the timeline in my head here, but he was definitely on the radar early. We'll say that for Penn State. They went down and saw him in person and like what they saw. So one of those top 5 or 6 guys, I think, when we were breaking it down last year, Zollers, Ryan Montgomery was out there, Malik Washington, Kritza, it's just all over the place with Carter Smith in there as well. But he has backed off of his Michigan commitment. There's a lot going on at Michigan right now. Bryce Underwood is directly under the microscope, it is one of those things where I think you look at the surrounding information. There's a lot of money going into that one because Michigan fans, Michigan boosters, Michigan whoever around there has not taken to this season very well in terms of not having a quarterback that can throw. I believe Newt Rodney called it the forward pass. So it's really it's really an interesting case study for this whole era right now. You know, you don't like what's going on, go out and get the number one recruit in the country and put together the package to do it. And that's what I think Carter Smith saw some writing on the wall there and decided that they needed to get their options in line. Now, Steve Wiltfong reported that Penn State was among the group that was interested, and I do believe that's the case, along with Clemson and Wisconsin. I think the caveat here, Clemson just lost Blake Hebert, not Hebert, to the Notre Dame a couple of weeks ago, so they don't have a quarterback in the class. So that one makes a lot of sense to me when you're taking a look at that. Penn State's been on other 2025 quarterbacks. Beckham Kritz is coming back this weekend for a visit, but they've also still been on other 2025 quarterbacks, most of them committed to other schools. So very, very interesting set of dominoes going on here. And Carter Smith, the latest one to fall nationally at quarterback.
Yeah, and this is a really stupid paint by numbers comparison here, but he reminds me a little bit of Jason Bean from Kansas in terms of the ability to run, the mobility, and having a strong arm, the size, the frame. It makes a lot of sense for an Andy Kotelnicki offense. Penn State wants to have these athletic guys that play the position this certain way. So it's not like I'm breaking any surprising news here that has to be Andy Kotelnicki specific, but I do think that it's a pretty good fit with what they're looking for. Ryan, anything to add here? Do you want to get onto the what was going to be what we led the show off with before this news and this information dropped this morning?
Yeah, I think it obviously lines up pretty well for Clemson. If he ends up visiting there in the next week or two, it'll be interesting to watch because he doesn't have a lot of time. Obviously, with the early signing period moved up, I think Penn State will obviously try to get him on campus maybe next weekend for the whiteout game. If not, maybe for Maryland later in the season. But I would, just writing on the wall and reading the tea leaves, you would think it would line up pretty well for Clemson. Of course, Penn State still has to kind of decide what they want to do with Kritza. I mean, I think I haven't really seen anything that says they're moving on. He's playing now down at Chaminade. Did he played this past weekend, right, Sean? Did you see
he's
anything?
Put some tape up, and you can see the arm there. I mean, you can still see some of the stuff that we saw beforehand, all the hand quotes potential that's there, because that's pretty much what it is. But he's playing with a really good offense that some of it is, you know, it's really interesting because I watched I think the second set of clips he put up. And the first minute of it is him throwing receiver screens and all this kind of stuff. And his best throws are buried there at the end where he's throwing outs, 15-yard outs that are on a line. Like he's got the arm, obviously. It's just, it's one of the crazier things I think I've ever seen in terms of how this all works, because there's talent there. At Miami Central, it was not conducive to what they were trying to do on offense. They brought the other guy in. The other guy did better. I mean, there's no glossing that up or getting around it. He went to Chaminade, where they obviously have receivers every single year, including Kobe Howard, the Penn State commit. So it helps to have those kind of weapons, but he can still make those throws. So it's not a complete wash, I think, as we thought it was going to be a month ago. So I think there's still stuff to evaluate. Penn State hasn't changed its stance on that. They're still keeping Beckham Kritz in the class, and they're still exploring options for 2025 quarterbacks. Again, as I said, most of which are committed elsewhere. So yeah, I don't think a ton has changed on that front. They can be patient with the Kritz side of it. I think they're being, they have some initiative with the committed guys, because you have to get them. You mentioned Carter Smith. Does he go to Clemson? I don't even know if Clemson plays home this weekend, but does he go to Clemson one of the next couple of weeks? Again, I think that makes a lot of sense. He's got Wisconsin on the list. So you're looking at situations where you've got slots available, and, is Penn State's available? Kind of.
Yeah. Well, Fitz, this
probably,
was kind of the
right?
plan. It just seems like this was the plan dating all the way back to this time last year when they accepted Kritz's commitment that they wanted to take two quarterbacks in the class. That was, kind of the rationale we worked through of, you can get Beckham Kritz right now in this particular situation with, the firing of Mike Yurcich, and kind of there's this ambiguous window, and also pursue your other top targets. So in the end, if they end up with two quarterbacks, like, other than the story that we got through to go there, is there a deviation from the plan initially?
There was. They were fine with one prior to the season, basically.
Okay.
They were fine with going with Kritza because they got Troy Hune. They feel really good about Troy Hune. We talked about that on the show earlier this week. So how much of that roller coaster do you ride? The other thing with Kritza there, I don't think many schools are trying to take him away. So, like, what's the sense in dropping him if you can keep this guy that you think has potential? Like, that's the thing, that the evaluation on him hasn't changed, even though you're kind of sitting there in the back of your head saying, I wonder why he's not playing. Or actually, it's closer to the front of your head now after the last couple of months. But you think about this, and it's like, they could take him if they can get another guy on top of him and stack 2 quarterbacks. That makes a ton of sense. Like, I know Beckham's not everybody's cup of tea with Penn State fans, but that makes a ton of sense to bring in 2 guys, especially in this portal era. You look at how things are going on the roster right now. Drew leaves next year. You've got a competition in the spring. You've got 3 guys coming back. And typically how that goes is if you've got 3 guys in a competition in spring, one of those guys ends up leaving after spring. So this is a position where you have to maybe overstock. And this is actually a pretty good scenario to do it.
Yeah.
Well, let me add one thing to you, Frank. Just from talking to people recently about that whole situation, like, I think Penn State, I think this experience for Kritza, I'm not gonna say it's humbling or anything like that, but like, he knows he needs developed, and I think Penn State likes the idea of he fully understands that, because a lot of quarterbacks, especially in the NIL transfer portal, they want to get in there and make an immediate impact. Where I think they like the fact that, hey, he knows he needs developed, he knows he needs time. And, in a world where so much movement happens throughout the transfer portal, I think they like the idea of, hey, he's going to likely give us some time to try and develop him. And, again, whether they stack another quarterback on top of that, time will tell. But I do feel like there's encouraging signs, at least recently, that they kind of are open to him probably staying in this class a little bit more than we thought a couple weeks ago.
T. Frank, can you throw that question back up on the screen from Ryan Sheard?
Yep.
Sheard. I should have known how to say that before I said it. Would Kritza accept being a number 2 quarterback in a number 2 class? If they want to take 2 quarterbacks, does he have a choice in the matter? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, if he wants to go to Penn State, and if they're going to say, hey, we're going to take another quarterback, like, what's the choice there? It's either no, okay, well, back on the market, see what's out there. And it's really, really late in the cycle, and schools will need quarterbacks, and some school would take a chance on that talent. I feel pretty confident about it, but at the same time, like, not really his choice.
And he was down with that originally too, when Zollers and Malik were being discussed regularly a lot. I mean, at least openly he said that, at least. So, but like Sean said, I don't see how he holds the cards in that situation.
Yeah, and I just going back to the point I made earlier, where I think it's a fortuitous situation if they're able to do this here in this late season, where they kind of get to where they wanted to be anyway, as you guys said, overstock the position going into a potential transition year, and also sneaking in a second quarterback when you have a hard time in major college football holding on to quarterbacks. It's super interesting. Just a quick preview of the conversation coming up at the end of the show. Will Howard was one of the top names available in college football this offseason as a transfer quarterback. Does anyone think that he is a star by any means? Does anyone think that he is a high-end pro potential quarterback? No. If you can find and develop good players at the position that have a shelf life, like this quarterback conversation about that we've gotten to the point at Penn State, it's different than the one of how do you find a guy that plays well at the college level, and how many of those guys can you get on your roster?
Can we talk Will Howard for a second? The chip on the shoulder conversation. Like, guy went to Kansas State. Like, Ohio State wasn't pounding the door for him. Penn State wasn't pounding the door for him. A lot of regional programs had offers to him. I thought he was a good prospect, not like Ohio State level prospect, but I thought he was a good player, and he did some really good things at Kansas State. But the chip on the shoulder thing is very interesting to me, because it's going out and finding the chip on the shoulder. And I'm sure it's always been there because it is the in-state school, but it's just really interesting to find the motivation versus just kind of having it to begin with. That's just an interesting thing to me with Will Howard. So again, what you would usually say in these games is, if you have to give yourself a reason to get up for this game, that's an issue. Like, that's that is a sort of meshes well with what's coming out of Columbus in terms of the leadership, in terms of the questioning. Like, Alex Gleitman does a wonderful job for us on 3, and I've known Alex for over a decade now covering Ohio State. Not many people do it better, and he's got serious questions about Ohio State's leadership, Ohio State's ability to function from that off-field caveat. The talent is obviously there, but the off-the-field component is so big, especially when you're talking about going into a game where if you lose this 2 losses, I think Ohio State would still get into the playoff with 2 losses because they're Ohio State. They have that big of a brand, and everyone's going to give them the benefit of doubt. And plus, they would have a win over Indiana there at the end of the year if they would get to 10-2. But at the end of the day, like, something's a little bit off there, and you can try and capitalize that because Ohio State's the one seems to be
Reeling
more under pressure this week.
Yeah.
Ryan Day's job, the second loss kind of gives you that. Now, doesn't mean there's not pressure on Penn State. Like, I'm not,
I don't know.
I'm sort of,
Yeah.
I'm isolating the Ohio State issues right here because Penn State's got their own set of, their own list of things to deal with. But I just think it's very interesting that would come out right after the game last week because, I mean, there's some hindsight there at play.
I want to get into, Ryan, I do want to get into this next topic in the conversation of the Michigan angle that we're going to start the show with. And Steve Wilfong earlier this week reported that Andrew Olesh is going to be at the game this weekend. So, Ryan, if you would, take us into the impact and the importance of this particular weekend to one of Penn State's longest standing top targets in the class of 2025.
Just the last thing real quick on Carter Smith, I had to add it in. Because I looked it up. Clemson is home this weekend. They are away next weekend. So that could actually work out to Penn State's favor as far as a whiteout visit goes. We will see. Yeah, here we go. Olesh, right? Sean, this is Sean's guy. So I always throw it to Sean in this one, and I'll hold it down for now. But like, this was when he committed, it was all about, Penn State has a stacked tight end room and he wants to find a place where he's going to play early. And now all of a sudden, with all these quarterback issues and a lot of questions at Michigan, it feels like maybe he's not quite feeling that as much. Now, didn't Alabama just get a tight end, Sean? Is that kind of checked them off the list?
Yes. And Oregon is in line to get Vander Plug, one of the great names in the class of 2025, a real person, by the way.
So this should set up to be Penn State's opportunity to potentially get him if he doesn't stick with Michigan. But man, it's just been a funky recruitment, right? I mean, this is a guy who grew up with family ties to Penn State, grew up going to games, wanted that Penn State offer more than anything. And, I've always kind of gotten the vibe that maybe he felt like it should have came sooner and maybe that turned him off a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong with that. You tell me, Sean, you know better than me, but this is their chance because I don't really see him visiting again before signing day. Maybe, obviously if he flips and came to Maryland game, maybe that'd be one thing. But I think this is it. And depending on how this weekend goes, maybe Penn State looks at a few other tight ends that they are monitoring at the moment. But it feels like this is Penn State's opportunity to kind of push the chips in and see what they can get from Olesh here. And less than 5 weeks now till signing day.
Fitz, let's just play out a hypothetical scenario, which I know everybody loves, but let's just say that he's caught up in the moment. He commits on Saturday. We do a video on Sunday. Is this one over even then for Andrew Olesh? He just seems to be a guy that is interested in taking this the distance. Am I wrong in that?
I would say since we're getting into November, if you get a choice, it's probably going to stick. Now, that's not everybody. The caveat there is he's got a Notre Dame official visit set up for next weekend, I believe it is. So that's, I think, one that he would like to get to. He's gone on a lot of visits. He's taken in a lot of the sites of college football. And he's gone to a lot of the best games in college football. To be honest with you, it's been a sort of a dream ride. If you're a college football fan, if you could tag along with him to some of these games, it's been really cool to watch. And I do envy kids that get to go see these awesome games in person. And there's a reason that they do, but and we don't. No, but beyond that, no. I think a decision would probably stick. This late. I kind of felt the same about Finney. You look at the situation and it's like he's got a month after this weekend. There's a month of the cycle left. So if he were to get caught up in the moment and commit, which I don't think that he would, like that doesn't make a ton of sense to me from a logistical standpoint with Notre Dame next weekend with a potential trip back to Michigan. You've got so many things that could stack up. And plus this is a recruitment where you've got a lot of, I don't want to say misdirection, but you've got a lot of reasoning out there. And I think that sort of masks the true search for his next college destination. So I think that people, again, have maybe soured on this one a little bit because of the words, but I don't think it's really any different than too many recruitments, big time recruitments. So I if he were to get caught up and go, and I think Penn State's in a pretty decent spot right now because of the way that Tyler Warren has been used, because of the way that Luke Reynolds has played, because of he's only right down the road. And I know that there's a really good sort of academic and athletic combination, a great academic and athletic combination at Michigan. Pretty good one right down the road at Penn State as well. So a lot of the things that he's looking for sort of align with what Penn State has done. And again, at some point, Ryan mentioned that maybe he was a little bit offended that Penn State drug their feet. At some point, those things go away. And that's not just a Olesh thing, but we've seen that so many times where it's like, okay, that, I'm not quite as offended by that anymore. When it gets to crunch time, that gravitational pull of National Signing Day comes back into play. All of a sudden, some things look pretty good for Penn State.
Yeah. And this is, by the way, I think for Penn State fans, he is a consensus top 50, top 100 player. Top players like this, the decisions don't end in June all the time. They do take these things down to the actual signing day, which Penn State typically doesn't get in those situations. They either have those guys in June, or there's one or two that they have over the time that I can remember of getting top guys that are making those decisions right down to the wire.
Yeah, and T. Frank, can we have a conversation here about Olesh? Because I think I've seen it on the board, and people are again a little bit fatigued on the thing because of all the words and all this stuff. How good of a prospect is he?
I don't, I'm overreactionary, but I think he can be on the level of Tyler Warren at some point in terms of his athletic ability, his receiving ability, his size, his frame. There's nothing he lacks to become a great prospect, and he's a natural receiver. You don't have to teach him how to catch the football. We'll see what he does with blocking. Like I've said before, he is getting to that point where he's doing that in high school. That's a good introduction, but he's got a big frame, and he can run like a receiver. That combination usually ends up on Sundays.
Yeah, and Matt Henderson's really good too. And, take all the good players you can get, and Andrew Olesh, still a very, very, very good player.
Yep. Today's show is powered by My Perfect Franchise, longtime sponsor here on the BWI Live Recruiting Show. Andy is like you. He's like the almost 300 people hanging out on the live show today. He is a recruiting fanatic. He wants to know the latest information. He's also somebody that has an understanding of the corporate world and changed his life for the better when he decided he wanted to leave the rat race for his American dream. And that's what he wants to offer to you as well. If you are a person in business, in finance, you understand how to manage things. Maybe you have the talent and the skills to manage your own business and make your own money. Franchise structures are different than just buying a business. You buy into a structure that already exists. You own and manage that franchise, which is part of a structure that can help you succeed. And whether things are booming or busting in the economy, and by the way, nobody actually knows because that stuff it's a little bit squishy. There's always something moving. There's always something that's advancing, and he's got his finger on the pulse of those things. I have a long list of the things he told me. Men's health trends, hope and home services, health and beauty, kids sports camps, directly related to this. Running those camps that all these players go to, no matter what sport it is, those are some of those franchises that he has learned about and are trending now in business. So if you want to give any of this a try, and all you have to do is talk to him to find out if you have the skills and the financial means to make this happen. 404-973-9901. Contact Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. He's not here to sell you into the company. He's here to find you the right one to manage, and he will tell you if it isn't. So check him out. He's a great guy, and appreciate his sponsorship here of the BWI Live show. Let's get into, Ryan, the list. Penn State has all these players coming to Happy Valley this weekend. We're going to break this down into a couple of different ways to talk about this. There's some new offers. There's some guys that Fitz wrote about in terms of maybe these guys we'd put in a pick for after this weekend. And then there's just the 26, the 27, the 28, all the guys that have Penn State offers that are names you need to know. So we're going to get through all of that today. But where do you want to start in terms of, and you're both muted, by the way, where do you want to start in terms of players and names to know on the list?
Thank you for that
from a high level if you want.
Because I definitely would have stayed on mute and started talking.
Oh, I know. I've gotten the rhythm of this down, so it's pretty good.
I literally just tweeted out another top 50 prospect from Florida. We just put that up a second ago. There's a good tease for you. We'll leave that one behind the paywall for now. But yeah, good quality visitor there. Another one added to the list. Like I mentioned, I mean, we're up over 90 or so total right now, and should be around 40 scholarship guys. I think somewhere around that ballpark by the end of the day. As far as where to start, I mean, I don't even know. It's honestly, for a noon game, it is beyond surpassed my expectations. Sean, would you agree with that as far as the guys that they're getting in, especially with the whiteout next week? Because when we circled back, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 days ago, there were so many more players. I mentioned on the podcast, it was like a 4-to-1 ratio on the guys talking about coming to the whiteout game instead. And obviously, they've been able to really do a great job at adding prospects to this Ohio State list over the last 10 days. But I can't remember. I mean, they've had good noon game recruiting lists against Michigan and Ohio State in the past, but I don't remember one this stacked with talent. A lot of friends of friends to get it to 100+ players and teams coming up together. But this one, I mean, there are, I don't know, well over a dozen. I mean, I think we're close to 15, maybe 20 or so 4-star prospects, or guys that at least will be that when they, get ranked down the road for, younger guys, 2027 and beyond. So I think obviously you have to start, since we've already hit on Olesh, I think you have to start with the top guys in the 2026 class. Sean, would you agree that Joey O'Brien is one of the most important visitors this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. Joey O'Brien for the safety athlete. We just changed him to athlete on 3, but
damn it. I was going to put athlete. I put safety. Sorry. Go ahead.
I did not expect that kind of venom coming out of it, but okay. No, number 104 in the On3 industry rankings, and really good prospect. I mean, I would list him as a safety personally, just because receivers are dime a dozen guys. But you look at the 6'4", 180, can really run, can do a ton of things great. And I think that you look at the RPM right now, it's a bit misleading because Notre Dame at 90% was the early favorite. I'm not sure that they're the early favorite anymore. I'm not sure that's early anymore, but I'm not sure that they're the favorite anymore. Penn State has done an excellent job recruiting Joey O'Brien, sort of coming back around to sort of cultivate that relationship. Terry Smith, Anthony Poindexter have been very much on it. I know he was going to go to Alabama in September, I believe, or maybe it was early October. Sort of turned around and went to Penn State instead. And I think Penn State made some moves there. So I think that certainly trending up for Joey O'Brien, Penn State putting a mega emphasis on Pennsylvania in the class of 2026 and trying to be frank, trying to close out the class of 2025. So O'Brien, a big time target for Penn State. I haven't quite lined these guys up by rating, but he's got to be among the top 5 or 6 2026 prospects that are slated to be on hand.
Fitz, do you have a comparison for him from an athletic perspective? I'm struggling to find, regardless of position, whether it's safety or receiver, I'm struggling to find a guy who is like this legit 6'4" that runs like him in the Penn State Rolodex or elsewise. Is there somebody in your mind that you can think of? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, so I'll try to filibuster a little bit more in terms of maybe because he's faster than Marcus Allen, but he's around that size. And he is probably bigger than a lot of Penn State's receiver targets. And some of those guys that we have on that list probably didn't have the straight line speed that he does. So I'm just curious if there's anybody that kind of tickles your brain in terms of, like that's reasonable.
Yeah, nobody really jumps out to me at this point in terms of like Penn State guys. Dejon Lane, maybe, but he's taller. Like O'Brien's taller than him. Was a really good two-way player with that kind of athletic profile. It's funny because you look at Notre Dame being the early leader and it makes sense. Kyle Hamilton, they did the same thing with Jadon Blair last year. Yeah. Those guys are the ones that make sense. A name to throw out from the way back, Jim Noel went to Boston College, was a 6'3" corner. There's not a ton of those guys that are out there that can move like that. And I don't know that O'Brien could play corner at the next level, but it's that kind of athlete that you're looking for, a guy that has those kind of hips. I'm blanking, and this is a bad Commander fan on the starting corner that went to Michigan from Canada. He's got that same kind of fluidity for a 6'3", 6'4" type guy, and that's really what you're looking for in a safety. And that's kind of why I selfishly say safety, because you put that guy on offense, and he fits in with a lot of the receivers that we've seen come through, not just Penn State, but like a lot of the 6'4" receivers kind of fit in a box. 6'4" safeties really do not. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Ryan, you have any thoughts on that? I'm trying to find if it's
athletically, does he remind you of Peter Gonzalez at all? But more fluid. That was my only thought. Just because we got,
I don't know that he's as explosive. That's the problem. Is Peter Gonzalez is legit, like, snaps off he's a long strider. He's got great speed. But if there's one thing I don't see necessarily now that I've seen all like the highlight tape and not just paying attention during one game, I don't know that he has that explosiveness. But yeah, the long speed and the frame are there for sure.
Yeah, just a little bit shorter. I'm not quite as fluid too. Joey, I think, is able to move his hips a little bit better. But I don't know. That was the only one that popped into my brain. Sean, you're usually better with that stuff than me anyway. But
yeah, I usually have time to Google. That goes into it. Yeah, it's very hard to look at someone and be like, oh, this guy reminds me of this guy.
Were you thinking of Jeremy Chin?
No.
I was thinking Benjamin St. Juste.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So.
But massively important recruit for Penn State. I would have him right now as one of their top 10 in the region-ish. And this is just me spitballing, but I mean, that's how just much he has just continued to rise. And the more and more people talk about him, obviously he's having maybe one of the best seasons of any player in the state at the moment. Offense, defense, no matter what it is. He's leading a LaSalle team that always has to go up against St. Joseph's Prep, and they'll do that again next weekend. And, they've already got one win over Prep, and, they're trying to get over that hump and obviously win a state championship this year. And Joey O'Brien and of course, Gavin Sidwell. I don't want to leave him on the bench on that discussion because he's having a great year too. But, to me, I mean, you can't point out too many players right now that are having a better season in Pennsylvania than Joey O'Brien.
Yeah, and if you go down the Pennsylvania rankings in 2026, and these are very fluid because they're still early. I know it doesn't seem like it, but some of these guys have been on the radar since they're freshmen. Number 1, Kevin Brown. Number 2, Tyler Merrill, who's going to visit this weekend. Number 3, Messiah Mickens. Joey O'Brien's number 4. Matt Sieg, number 5. He's going to visit this weekend. Peyton Falzone, the Virginia Tech commit, is still a target for Penn State as a tight end. David Davis. I mean, Penn State, you can see the emphasis that they're putting into Pennsylvania in 2026. And I think that, O'Brien is a guy that it would be a big win in the sense that this wasn't a Pennsylvania kid that was always coming to Penn State. And, that's different than what we've seen in the past couple of cycles.
Every single guy you just mentioned there, we might be on campus this weekend. We're not sure about Falzone. I don't think Falzone is. He's committed to Vatech, but everybody else, I think.
You keep going down the list, and Elias Koch is there, and you've got top 10 guys, Brickle, and all the Whitey Collier is going to be there. So like, there's a lot of guys and a lot of emphasis. But I mean, you think about it. What do we always say with a noon kick? Like, get your regional guys in here, get the guys that can get here quickly, get them in, and that should work.
Which is why I was scrambling to get that Florida prospect up that we just posted, because that surprised me. I just thought he would be more of a whiteout visitor than this weekend. But yeah, I mean, speaking of Koch, I mean, Koch's been a guy we've been watching for commitment for potentially for, I don't know, at least a month or two now. I would say a month and a half or so. Obviously Messiah, but by the way, Lex Cyrus tried to throw everybody off last night with the Messiah Mickens is going to South Carolina tweet. I spoke with Messiah. He's coming to Penn State, everyone. So calm down on that one. I did have our colleagues hitting us up. Hey, what do you think about Messiah coming down here? I was like, let me just clarify this first. This seems like a Lex evil Kermit gif kind of a tweet here.
I was going to say he's reduced to trolling now, huh?
Yeah, for the most part. But we have 5 more weeks to talk about Lex. But Messiah will be here. And my point is go back to Elias is obviously Kevin Brown's committed. Messiah's committed. Elias is, if you're looking for somebody that's going to be a 2026 commitment in the next however many weeks, Elias would have to be really high on that list as far as guys that I think could make a move sooner than later.
Do you think there's a possibility, like if there were people under consideration for commitments or RPMs, that we would write a story about that? D. Frank?
Oh, did you? I don't know. I didn't pay attention to anything yesterday. I was just going to town and spamming every freaking high school football player within 500-mile radius of here. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Check it out on Blue White Illustrated. RPM consideration got 6 guys on the list this weekend that are heavily under consideration right now that I think Penn State's doing a great job for. I think it's interesting to spin off of that conversation. You look at where we're at in the recruiting timeline, the calendar of everything, and it's not a popular time to commit. If you're a 2026 kid, you get a wave of those guys through the summer, coming off of Lash Bash, getting it done before their season. We saw it with Kevin Brown and those guys. And Penn State's got Jasir Rogers obviously is on the rise as well. But you see those guys getting it out of the way before the season. The season kind of takes precedence for when you're a junior, because this is such a big year for you. So not a ton on the radar in terms of making a decision traditionally. We'll see what kind of effect the next 2 weeks have. Ryan and I were talking yesterday. I think it's interesting to take a look at the double dippers, the ones that are going to be here this weekend, the ones that are going to be here next weekend.
Yeah.
Usually that's a really good sign for Penn State. I know that there's a handful of those guys that will be here for both games, and I think that really makes a lot of sense there. So that's what I'm looking at. Just check out that piece because there's some good names in there, and I think Penn State really has a great opportunity in the next couple of weeks.
Shockingly, 3 of those double dippers are on your RPM story. I'm surprised by that.
Wow. It's almost like you guys know what you're doing. Can you guys tell me a little more about Sean Alston? This is a new name that you guys have put out there, and I'm just interested because I'm getting to know the running back from Ohio. Ryan, what can you tell everyone about this built dude from Ohio? Holy cow, 5'10", 200. He looks like it.
Sean, I mean, remember watching him at camp? He had a pretty good camp. He was, I think, at the second whiteout camp, or one of the two back in July. And that's when he left town with an offer. And, immediately he called Penn State one of his favorite schools. Right now, I don't think this is trending towards early commitments or anything like that. I get the vibe that, he's probably going to announce some top schools here in the next month or so. And then likely spring, I think, would be the time that, we keep an eye on him. Of course, with Messiah Mickens already committed, that'll be interesting to see, how Penn State looks at that, how Sean looks at that, and so on and so forth. But, right now, I feel like Penn State has as good of a shot as anybody with him. Sean, is there anybody I'm not thinking of as far as like who's standing out above him? Like Penn State's absolutely top 3, at least in my eyes, with Alston.
Yeah, Penn State's in a great spot with Alston. To me, it's more about recruiting the position and how J1 Snyder has been able to stack up guys that sort of fit what he likes. And I mean, they're going for elite guys. And to me, this position, you're probably going to learn more about guys at this position, 2026 guys in their junior year, than anyone, because it's sort of separating time. And I don't think we're there yet in terms of nailing down which guys are Penn State level running backs. Penn State has recruited running back extremely well, top 5-10 in the country over the last several years. You see that product on the field as well. So I think that it's going to be a process. I would not RPM pick whatever a running back to Penn State right now, just because I think there's a lot of filtering to be done. I think there's still a lot of evaluation to be done. And I think that they're not in a rush, especially with Messiah Mickens in the class, to add a second guy until you've got all your chips in order and decide maybe this winter, maybe even early next spring, who you want to push the hardest for.
For sure.
We got to get to our game preview because the chat is all just talking about
We're 40 minutes in.
Wow. Yeah.
Didn't even realize
That's what I'm saying. Like, this show went really fast with as much as we had to talk about. The chat's already have their predictions. Penn State has lost this game already. But I want to get to a couple more of the conversations here on the recruiting really quickly before we get into our game preview. This is Benny Patterson. I don't know if he's one of the guys that's going to be here this weekend. I know he's a recent offer, and I wanted to get some thoughts on that particular situation with the D-line 2025 and a player that is, cropping up as we get down the stretch, kind of like some of the other conversations to start the show. So who wants to go take the lead on this one?
I talked to Charles Power about him yesterday. I mean, I just think he's one of the faster rising, defensive tackle prospects in the country right now. Love his twitch. I mean, love his burst. I think his highlights are really fun. Sean, you give Sean credit on this one. He mentioned, what was it, a day or two before the offer came out, as a player he had to watch in his notebook, his trimmings notebook earlier this week. And, that gave me the opportunity to watch Benny Patterson a little bit more. And man, I thought his film was really fun to watch. Now, of course, he's committed to Cincinnati. He's taken an official visit to USC so far. And what was the other school, Sean? What's the other official visit he's taken? I'm sorry. I thought there was one more.
I'm sorry. I just got another confirmation from a Florida
It's okay.
Kid, so
yeah, I know. It's funny. I keep getting dinged as well for different little things here. So we're trying to do a lot at the moment. But long story short, like Florida State's in the mix. Florida State, LSU, Michigan have all offered. We know he took an official visit to USC. I thought he had one more coming up. I thought it was maybe this weekend. I apologize. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But
Florida State,
Florida
State, Cincinnati, USC, Michigan. He went out to USC, I believe, for the Penn State game.
Yeah.
And then he went to Michigan last week, and I think Michigan may have turned it into their advantage at that point. But I think still pretty well open. Deion Barnes has been talking to him for a while now. That offer just came this week. You mentioned we mentioned him earlier this week, and I think he's been a guy that we've been watching for a while. If they're looking for another defensive tackle, speaking of which, Ivan Kamaju's midseason highlights came out. It's pretty good. Good. I'll send them over to you then, T. Frank, for what he's working with that physical package and those measurements. Penn State's got something there. But back to Benny Patterson, he's been one of the hottest senior riser type guys to go with, and you see that with commit lists of a Cincinnati, of a school that traditionally has done a really good job evaluating, finding those guys and turning them into eventual pro prospects. Well, now schools are mining those commit lists. There's a hierarchy, obviously, in the Power Four, where you're mining those commit lists to see what you can get, and those schools are going to suffer because of it. So I think that's an interesting twist here, where Benny Patterson all of a sudden, moves pretty well up the board for Penn State.
He's another guy to watch for a visit. I would think next week, like he'll be someone we have circled for an official visit at some point. He'll certainly, I'll be reaching out to him Monday. I guarantee that.
Any other final names you want to get to before we get to the preview of the game? I know that we discussed a fraction of what's going on.
I mean, yeah, that's where
the ones that you want to discuss, not the ones that are over. Because again, you can read all the names. You don't have to have Ryan tell you all of the names here. We've gotten through all of my videos anyway. So is there anybody that you're interested in, just that piques your interest before we get into the game preview?
I always just I know he's 2027. I go back to Maxwell Hiller all the time. I just think that this guy is one of the best offensive line prospects in the state, and even in the last couple of years. I would have Kevin Brown there, and I would have Maxwell Hiller as my number 2, regardless of class or anything like that right now. Obviously Michael Carroll moved out of the state, or else I'd probably have him in that mix as well. He's down at IMG now, but I just think Hiller has it all. He just got an Alabama offer the other day. Just visited Ohio State this past weekend, and here he is visiting Penn State. I think it'll be his 8th, so he's a double dipper. So this will be by next weekend when he comes to the Washington game. You're talking about 8 visits since April, which is always that's a lot in that kind of a time span.
Sorry, that's my easy go-to joke there.
So I know he's young, and fans we obviously want to talk about the Brandon Finneys and Oleshes and the guys that really are going to determine things down this stretch here. But I just cannot stress enough how important of a recruit this is going to be for Penn State moving forward. One other 2027 I just want to mention too is Larry Moon, because Larry Moon is another one of those cornerback prospects out of Western PA, where Terry Smith has been an absolute ace of a recruiter for really throughout his entire career, but especially in recent years. And, he's top 100 prospect right now, hasn't visited Penn State since March, but he also visited Penn State, 6-7 times before going out and seeing a lot of other schools here in recent months. So it's really good to get him back on campus. He's a player that Penn State should be in the mix with until the very end. And, I've had enough people mention Larry Moon to me going back 2+ years now to know that this is going to be the absolute priority prospect. Again, he's young. I get it. But I just can't stress enough to these fans that, they may be young, but these are going to be the marquee guys that we're talking about here in about a year from now.
Yeah, we were in this exact spot with the class of 2025. It feels like 10 minutes ago. So these things go a lot more quickly than you might think. Speaking of, this show has flown by, and we're going to cram our preview of the game into the final about 14 minutes of the show. Penn State, Ohio State coming up on Saturday. What happens between the lines? We've talked about it all week long. We've done our prep. We've done our predictions. That's coming up right now on the show. So Fitz, I want to come back to you. Start this off. I know we talked early in the week. What have you learned since then about this particular matchup? What do you think is important as we transition into looking what happens on the field between Penn State and Ohio State?
Well, it's a shame we're going to cram this preview into a couple of minutes because we haven't talked about it at all this week. But actually, take a look at the shows that we've been doing this week. There's been a lot of Ohio State talk. So we're making up for lost time with recruiting, and we're back into it with the preview here. Again, Ohio State, something seems a little off. Just, I talk to Alex a lot offline here, and he says, that offensive line issue is real. It's not a situation where you can plug play and forget about it. I know they're having some, conversations about moving Donovan Jackson, the guard, out to left tackle and sort of fitting in from there, which, by the way, at practice last night, we saw JB Nelson taking right tackle reps. So it's not just Ohio State. It's not just Penn State. This stuff happens all over the place. It's about to be November in college football. There's a lot of teams beat up. You can't replace them. There's no practice squad. There's no free agent signings or anything like that. But obviously, I think that's going to be a very big storyline here. Ryan Day said last night that the backup to Josh Simmons, who was their best offensive lineman, who was out for the year, Zen Michalowski. Sorry, I'm not great with names, but he's probably not going to play.
Zach Smith's coming for you. Sorry,
yeah,
got to get that in there.
That's oh god. There's definite issues there. So I'm very curious to see how guys like Abdul Carter handle things. We did not see Denine and Sutton at practice last night. How Penn State handles things on the edge, Vanover, Smith, Vilbert, those guys. And if you get into a situation where you can get Max Granville out there just to rush the passer, that means Penn State's in an advantageous spot. So
I think that matters more this week too, given that situation where last week I thought Wisconsin's offensive line pretty good, pretty well coached. I don't see that. Max Granville, an 18-year-old freshman, I feel like could get pressure in this game as opposed to last week where I think he was out there to get some reps.
Has to be the right situation. It has to be a situation where the rest of the defense can make up for that when they run an inside draw back inside, because obviously that's been a thorn in the side of Penn State's third long defense. Has not been giving up big passes. It's been giving up the short stuff, and then the lack of tackling takes over and things like that. So I think that's definitely worth going to. Where I twist it here is Ohio State's offensive line. We talk about not having a left tackle and blocking Carter and the pass rush and everything like that, but they haven't been able to run block very well. Like that, this is not a group that you're used to seeing from Ohio State. They have two tremendous backs and just haven't really gotten a ton of traction so far. And I think that's probably maybe more impactful in the grand scheme of things. The sacks will be the big plays. The hits on the quarterback will be the big plays. But from a down-to-down basis, if Ohio State can't run the ball, that's going to be trouble. Now, again, two amazingly talented backs that have hit big plays against Penn State for different respective universities. I think that's definitely something that Penn State has to avoid. You get the ball in the flat, the first guy's got to make that tackle, or else it could be a long run for notably Trayvon Henderson, who's been very good against Penn State. So it's one of those things where you look at the injuries and you look at the sort of setbacks that both teams have had, and it's really concentrated on Ohio State in that one area. And I think that might be worse than you've got a quarterback who's hobbled. You've got a defensive end who's hobbled. Anthony Donka's status still very much up in the air, and he's clearly hurt. But those are kind of spread out, and you can hopefully, for Penn State's sake, can mask them a little bit better than saying Ohio State's missing two left tackles. What are we going to do there? We're going to slide a guard over. There's only so much you can do in that situation because of the way that your roster is lining up. So tremendous weapons on the outside, tremendous weapons at running back. You just got to, kind of bring that game closer to the center, bring that back to center if you're Penn State.
I want to get Ryan in here quickly, but just quickly, I've made a lot about Nolan Rucci starting at right tackle and some of the issues that could present to the offense. Generally, when you put that combination of a potentially hurt Drew Aller and that tackle situation, but would Nolan Rucci be the best tackle option for Ohio State this week if he were in the scarlet and gray on that left side, do you think?
I'll leave that for you, Sean.
Thanks. I appreciate that. We love hypotheticals over here. Maybe.
T-Frank said earlier, he's like, I know we all love hypotheticals. I was about to cut him off, said, no, T-Frank, you like hypotheticals. We don't.
I know you don't. You're
going to have your own show that's just hypotheticals. And I think that would be perfect. I would love it. I would not participate, but I would love, sort of watching you talk your way around that. Yeah. Offensive tackle is hard to find, man. And they take time to grow. I mean, this is not a situation where you're popping up overnight and, you throw in, Penn State's not going to throw in Egan Boyer and hope that, nothing happens. It's kind of the same with Rucci with replacing Donka. You're not going to get the same results or desired results. When Josh Simmons went out, man, that's massive. I mean, that is one of the playoff altering injuries of the season in college football. And that's like, it's a really big deal. So yes, I think, in this hypothetical, could Rucci be that guy? Yeah. But like on the flip side, you're watching Penn State games and seeing Wisconsin go after Rucci. You're seeing all these guys go after Rucci. So that's what Penn State should be doing is overloading that side, seeing what they have to do, make them think too much up front. And it's going to leave you a free runner and a free shot at Will Howard. And Will Howard can make plays with his feet. He can make those first downs. You got to keep him in front of you. Again, I can't hammer home enough how great of a job Hakeem Beamon did on that pick 6 to just be in front of the quarterback, obstruct those lanes. And then all of a sudden you don't see Jalen Reed standing by himself and you throw it in his chest. Like, those are the things that can happen. Those are the things that are going to need to happen if you're Penn State to win this game.
Ryan, what do you think in terms of most important matchups for Penn State to have an advantage in order to win this game?
Dare I say mentally? And I honestly mean that. Just because, look, they're 1-9 in 10 years, and everybody talks about it. Guess who talked about it earlier this week? Jeff Exner with me, the Penn State commit, about how Penn State has to win big games. Everybody has heard about it all week. So I just think from a mental standpoint, getting over that hump is, I think Penn State has a lot of those advantages this week, or at least can stick with them better than we thought a while back, or at least certainly in preseason. So I would hope that Penn State's run game could get something going there. I mean, I would think that Penn State's run game could be an advantage to them this week, but I don't know. I mean, JT's been such a stud against Penn State over the last couple of years. Who knows what they'll be able to get up the middle. Obviously, they're going to need a wide receiver to emerge. I don't know. I wouldn't say that's an advantage for Penn State or anything like that, but they're going to need somebody. Tyler Warren is the easy pick, I guess, right? I think that's what everybody in the chat would say. But look, to me, like, I'm going to come back to the things outside of on the field with this, and this is kind of where I've been all week. But this is a situation where I think Ohio State needs this win more than Penn State, and I don't think Penn State.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up because
they do.
They have one loss. If they lose this game, Penn State has the inside track to the Big Ten championship game, and then their fate is not in their hands. I don't remember the last time in the last 10 years when Ohio State's fate wasn't in their own hands. You know, like, it's been a long time since Penn State has had the opportunity coming into this game to have the high ground in terms of opportunity. And people have been asking all week, like, are they playing with house money? Yes and no. Like, they need to win this game for what you're talking about: perception, prestige, psyche. But mathematically, they have an advantage in this game. And I don't think that they've had one. They have not had that, especially being at home, in a very long time.
I just wonder if that's not to Penn State's favor, though. Ohio State is at its lowest point in the season right now. Do you ever want to play Ohio State when they are at their low point and people are cashing out on Ohio State? I don't think that's a great opportunity. I don't think it's a great time for Penn State to be playing them, honestly. I'll be honest. I took Ohio State to win this game. I don't like the situation. I don't like the way it lines up as far as, okay, let's bet against Ohio State when they're down. That's a real money winner over the last decade. Sure.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, everybody's on Penn State this weekend, and you know, nationally a lot of people are on them. People gambling wise, they're on Penn State. When you're betting against Ohio State at their lowest point, I mean, I never thought that. First off, they lose that game to Oregon, and they should have easily won it. I mean, that's 50-50 of a game that you can never get. Okay, they're down a little bit. Now people are down on even more after a win after Nebraska, and they got to hear about that all week. You're going against a team you're 1-9 against over the last, or you're 9-1 against over the last decade. You beat them pretty good at home last week. I get it. It's a different cast of characters and all that, but then that's where I come back to the mental thing, because it just, to me, Penn State can lose this game, still get a home playoff game. It's not the end of the world. Where Ohio State loses this game, and sure, they'll still probably make the playoffs. They'll be a 9, 10, 11 seed, something like that. But I just think it means more for Ohio State, and that's just not a situation I think you want to be in if you're Penn State.
JC in the chat said, did James Franklin seem different yesterday? And yes, like, if you watched and thousands of you have watched that, yes, he was very different. So I would disagree that this doesn't mean as much to Penn State. I think you're right. The desperation mode does have a certain feel about it that brings that another level of intensity. But for all the same reasons, I can make the argument that Penn State needs this game more from that perspective. And Fitz, it comes back to the fact that, like, I don't feel like the offense right now is in sync. I don't know. I would say Penn State right now feels like the better coached team in terms of what you said, the leadership, some of the questions about that stuff. Give me a thumbs up if you can come back on air here, because I know something just happened. All right. This is I guess this to me is the thing is, which situation do you put more trust in? And I know the chat is out on James Franklin winning big games, but this offense and this defense feel in sync. And remember, this is the first year that they are in Andy Kotelnicki's system. And I don't feel like, at least from the quarterback perspective, like that's been an issue. Do you remember in 2021 when we were talking about plowing every single rep that existed into Sean Clifford to get him ready to play games? Drew Aller has executed this offense very well from the start. It hasn't always produced the points you want, but I think that's more situational than it is execution from the overall part of the offense. So I guess, Fitz, in that perspective, do you feel the same way, or do you feel differently about what you've seen from Ohio State?
Yeah, I feel, well, from Ohio State, it's a little bit different. I think with them, the transitive property doesn't exist. I don't care how they looked against Nebraska last week, because I think you're going to get a different team pretty much every week. You mentioned they should have won at Oregon. Like, that was and against Oregon is the number one team in the country. Like, that is the team, that is the peak of them. Like, well, the peak of them would be winning that game, but that is what you're going to see from a talent perspective. You mentioned Jeremiah Smith, Egbuka on the outside. I mean, all these talented players haven't changed that much. Now, you can talk about leadership. You can talk about sort of masking the holes on the offensive line. And yes, that stuff will come into play and probably slows the game down, makes it more of a slog than we would have expected, more of a slog certainly than Oregon, Ohio State. So that's going to change some things, but the talent's still there. Like, there's, you come back to it, Ryan made a great point. I mean, they're down, but they have the ability, more so than pretty much any team in the country or the Big Ten, to flip that script.
I want to bring this up because JC in the chat
says,
yes, the dog agrees. JC says Cole Nittany versus Knowles, not encouraging. Oklahoma State 55, Kansas 3. Andy Kotelnicki got to Kansas that year in May. That was a COVID affected year. So he was like, that offense wasn't installed. They were not running the plays. They didn't know what they were doing at that point. So when you have a guy who's a well-established, good defensive coordinator versus somebody who's trying to establish a culture and all those things, like that, I watched that game. Kansas's offense didn't know what it was doing. It was still learning the playbook in that part of the year. So I do want to put a caveat on that, because we did investigate that this offseason. Check that out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Ryan, this is a big thing in the chat as well. There's been a couple of instances of this. Scared about the athletes on the Ohio State offense. Do you think Penn State's defense can keep a lid on that enough to give Penn State's offense a chance?
Jalen Kimber, Elliott Washington, right? Key players in my eyes. I think AJ Harris has done a pretty good job. Obviously, Jalen Reed, Zeki Wheatley's held his own. To me, it's those second, third, fourth cornerbacks that are going to be rotating in there to be able to stick with Egbuka.
Cam Miller.
We know. I mean, even whoever challenges Jeremiah Smith, I mean, it is what it is. He's a stud. He's going to be a top pick for a reason. And there's a reason he was the number one recruit in the country last year. To me, it's about those young corners and whether they're able to step up to the moment. We've seen at times where they have done that, right? I thought that they did a pretty good job against USC considering some of the talent that was there. But we've also seen some other times where teams have been able to dink and dunk on them and be able to move the ball down the field fairly consistently, or at least fairly easily. So to me, it's all about those young corners, and obviously even to some degree then the rotation behind Wheatley as well, if they really do rotate, which they won't much, because Wheatley and Reed have been playing vast majority of the snaps, more snaps than I think Penn State would have preferred earlier in the year as far as their safeties go. But I feel okay about Penn State's defensive line, which was not always the case, interior and all that. And to me, it just comes down to, can those guys hang with some of the best wide receivers in the country? We'll find out here in 48 hours.
Yeah, that was the thing, is that when Ohio State had the opportunity to throw the ball deep and they got the coverages they want against Nebraska, they got touchdowns. Like, they got the big plays, but the offensive line was such an inhibiting force that the plays from the running backs were made out of structure, or at least they were making plays above the structure and finding those gaps and seams. Penn State's defensive line, if they're gap sound, and there have been some times they've been a little bit out of position, but they have been dominating every single offensive line so far this year. And I feel like they've seen cohesively better units throughout this season so far, even if the talent and the name and all those things goes a different way. We got to get to the predictions, and we got to get Fitz off air.
Yeah, because Fitz got to get out of here.
Things are blowing up in his life. So let's get to our game predictions. Fitz, I'll start with you. Where do you see this game going when it all shakes out?
Well, it's interesting. Rob just put up in the chat that Jeremiah Smith had one big play against Nebraska, and that's it. This game is going to come down to 3 or 4 plays. And if one of those is a big play by Jeremiah Smith, that's good for Ohio State, obviously. So I think that's what we're looking at with this type of game structure. Penn State, Ohio State have played a very distinct game plan for the last 8 years for the most part. Like, Penn State's played, I guess 10 years, I guess it would be. Penn State's played them pretty well comparatively to its Big Ten counterparts. They just haven't been able to break through, and it's come down to those couple of plays. And if Jeremiah Smith hits one of those big ones, or if Trevion Henderson hits a big screen and run like he did a couple of years ago, like that stuff matters. So I think that's what you're coming down to. My prediction, I have Penn State falling 22-20. It was supposed to be 23, and I hit the wrong button apparently. And T. Frank showed that to me this morning. So I was going to be 23-20. I don't know how to get 22. No, it's not you. I went back and looked, and I typed it. So that's my bad. But a very close game. Special teams, very important in this game. Not just making the kicks, but these field position aspect of it. Penn State has been poor in that aspect. Riley Thompson has to have a very good game. We don't mention it enough, but the punters are always very important in this game. So Penn State needs to do a better job of being in an offensive position from a special teams standpoint. I don't necessarily think that means returning punts or returning kicks and all that stuff. It's just putting yourself in a better position, because when you're talking about a game at 40, I have 43 points. That means that there's a lot of possessions that are ending with punts, and there's a lot of possessions that may end in a turnover, a lot of possessions that may end in going for it around midfield and not getting it. Those are the things that really comes down to. And field position, definitely something that has favored Ohio State so far. But again, going back to my transitive property thing, some of this stuff overflows into the game. Some of it is irrelevant. So I'm curious to see which end of that spectrum it is. I think that James Franklin's 1-9 record against Ohio State comes into play here. They got rid of Mike Yursich last year because of not only the offensive performance right before he got fired with Michigan, but also you saw Ohio State last year. Penn State was in a shell the entire game and scored at the end to make it look better, but nobody was thinking Penn State was going to come back because of the offensive output. Has Andy Kotelnicki fixed that? Maybe, but we don't know going into this weekend. So I think that that's really what you have to look at. You got to give the team with a 9-1 record in the last decade sort of the benefit of the doubt on that situation. So I think Penn State has avenues to win, and I think it's as good as any avenues that they've had in the last couple of years. Will they do that? I mean, you got to prove it on Saturday.
Ryan, a perfect timing. Ryan, what's your prediction?
You've spent way more time breaking this game down than I have this week. That's what happens when you have 100 kids coming or 100 recruits coming to campus. So I'm going to throw it. I'll make it quick. I mean, I took 27-20 Ohio State. I'm in I'll predict it when I see it boat. Last year I picked Penn State to win. I think 3 of the last 4 years or something like that, I've picked Penn State to win, just because I feel like the odds are always kind of more in their favor now, from the perspective of just how long can these consecutive wins against Penn State really keep going, right? I'm just always kind of one of those people that just I'll predict it because I feel like it has to change at some point, and that has not happened for 3-4 years now. So I am fully in I'll pick Penn State when they finally get over the hump. T. Frank, you've broken down this game way more than I have, though, so I'm going to throw it to you.
Yeah. So it kind of became a 2-game season when you look at some of the things that have happened with the injury at left tackle, and honestly, Latham Ransom being injured, and how they have performed in the last 2 games against Oregon and Nebraska. But also they played Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, Michigan State, and Iowa. Iowa was close at halftime because they can't run the football. And that has been a systemic issue for this team this year outside of those explosive plays. I wrote this in the article. You can go read it for free, but I'll tell you right now, if Drew Aller were fully healthy, I would put my full weight behind Penn State winning this game, maybe by a touchdown, because he is a difference-making quarterback that can find the open, soft parts of the zones. They're playing more zone than I expected this year. And I don't know necessarily why, where they're doing a little bit less, I feel like, with those 3 safeties than they have done previously. And then it comes down to the explosive plays, like you guys have already covered. If Penn State can keep a lid on those, I think Andy Kotelnicki is that guy. I've seen enough evidence, and we brought up Kansas. Look at the difference between Kansas now and Kansas when he was there. It is a different team. It is a different offense. They don't have the keys to make all of that run. Penn State has found different ways to win this year. And if you see where I'm going with this, I'm picking Penn State. 24-21. I don't know where those 24 points are coming from. I think that Aller's health and the right tackle situation is something that is going to be an issue. And how they split the reps between the 3 quarterbacks they can go to with Tyler Warren and with Bo Pribula and Drew Aller, and how they can make the running game function with Aller under center and others. I think that's going to be a big part of this. I kind of am going on faith that they'll figure it out because they're much smarter than I am, because there are schematic issues, but they have overcome a lot of schematic issues so far to still win football games. So that'll do it for the BWI Live Show. Thank you so much to Ryan and to Fitz. We'll be back with more. We'll have more content coming up on Friday, and we'll have the BWI Live Show, post-game show, tailgate show, all that coming up this week. From us to you, thank you for being here. This has been an awesome week from you, the fans, being here. We love you. We thank you for supporting what we do. We got more coming for you, so stay tuned.